Betsy Faria was dead. Her husband Russ sitting in jail for her murder while Pam Hupp is doing what? Counting $150,000 of Betsy's life insurance money. Are the police really this inept? You might be surprised, because soon Pam's mother will die mysteriously. And who is the insurance beneficiary? Pam Hupp. And when people in town, including the local and national news, start looking at her as a killer, Pam does what? She kills again. This is a story of lies. A man wrongly convicted, a small-town police force with an ego, a DA as green as a frog in clover, and a killer. A serial killer. This is the incredibly true story of Pam Hupp. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Pottorff. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Everybody. Welcome for part two.
Part two.
Part two of Pam. It's Pam part two.
Just when you thought you couldn't get enough Pam, we're giving you part two.
There was so much. I'm seriously cramming 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound sack.
There you go.
It's a lot. Wherever you're listening, like, rate, and review. That helps other people to find us. You can also join the Facebook group.
And answer that question.
That's right. We're getting tons of people over from the Kentucky Fried Cousins.
Yep.
If you used to be a cousin, come on over. We'd love to have you as an in-law.
And an outlaw.
Or an in-law who is an outlaw.
Or an outlaw that's an in-law.
Yeah, okay.
That's right.
We have a lot to cover today. I am going to jump into this so fast because there's so much in here. Again, 10 pounds in a 5-pound sack. Before we get started, I want to thank some sources: KSDK Channel 5 in St. Louis, the St. Louis Magazine, the Cinemaholic, thenetline.com, Newsweek, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Wikipedia, the New York Post, Crime Reads, and the book Bone Deep: Untangling the Betsy Faria Murder Case by Charles Bosworth Jr. and Joel Schwartz. Like I said last time, I did read it. I will post a link to all the sources in the show notes. It's a great book. It really is a great book.
All right.
Are you ready for this?
Pencils down. Ready. Begin.
Eyes on your own paper. All right, let's do it. When we left off from part one, Russ had been arrested for the murder of his wife. And the police go back to Pam's house and they want to interview her husband, Mark. Now, Police Work 101, no one but the person you're questioning gets to be in the room. That's Police Work 101. And who was in the room? Pam was in the room.
Pam's always in the room.
Pam is everywhere. And every time in the script I was writing Pam, I kept thinking to myself, Rob's going to say, are you saying Pam?
You saying Pam or Panned?
No, Pam or Pan.
Panned. I think I can help you with the whole Pam. Sorry.
Miss Lady.
Yeah.
Isn't that what they call her? Miss
Hello,
Lady?
Miss Lady. And we're not going to tell you what movie that is, so go ahead.
Oh, I know. Rob loves to put these in there. So go ahead and start writing in In-Laws and Outlaws what movie that's from. But Pam answered every damn question for Mark. And during this interview, she tells police that Russ had a drinking problem. She says this during the interview that Russ had said that he would be getting a lot of money when Betsy was gone. And she casually mentions that she doesn't know what happened, quote, last night again. Okay, so it's after Betsy's murder. So very hinky for sure. But police are like, nah, we got Russ down at the station. We got our man. No need to look any further. Nothing to see here. Move along.
Move along, people.
They ask Pam to take a polygraph test, and she agrees. But days later, she produces a note from her doctor that says that she cannot take a polygraph due to her head injury.
What does that have to do with the
which
price?
To which I say, whatever. And then when they really get to the meat of it, this Dr. Ronald Fisher says, well, I only wrote it because she asked me to. She can take a polygraph test. I mean, he backs out of that so fast. It was crazy.
Wow.
But the police are sticking to the results of the shoddy polygraph test that they gave to Russ and the testimony of Pam on January 4th, 2012. And Russ is charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action, which first-degree murder means intentional killing of another person by someone who has acted willfully, deliberately, and with planning.
Which you can get the death penalty for.
And everyone is shocked. Russ's people are shocked. The media jumps on board with the story coming from the police that he'd stabbed her and that their marriage was rocky and tumultuous. And here's the thing. Betsy's daughters are distraught. Their mom was murdered, and police are telling them that they think your stepdad did this. So they're on board with it. They want Russ to pay, and I think they just wanted someone to pay.
Sure.
Because they're grieving. And Betsy's friends are saying this too, and so is her mom. Now, Russ's sister gets him a defense attorney, Joel Schwartz. And this is one of the guys who wrote the book that I'm just so highly recommending. And Joel starts pouring through all the evidence on the case, the police reports, the interviews, all of it. And Joel is like, why is no one looking at Pam Hupp?
Yeah.
She's the last person to see Betsy alive, and she was the last-minute beneficiary on the $150,000 worth of life insurance. And Pam's story has changed more times than a baby in a beer drinking contest. And guess what? Pam's got no alibi, but we already talked about this. Russ does. And police try to do a test run. Remember, he was driving from his friend's house on bro night.
Right.
He stops from their home on his way to Troy. He stops, he gets Arby's. And the police need to see if they can make it in the amount of time from when he said he left bro night and made it to the 911 call. So they want to see how much time is in there.
Right.
And they just want to see if he's got time to commit a murder, let alone one with 55 stab wounds and virtually no evidence left behind, including his clothes.
Right.
And it took 23 minutes, and that was without the Arby's run. So it gave him 9 minutes to kill her, clean up, call 911. No evidence on Russ, not one drop of blood, no DNA under his nails, and he's wearing exactly what he wore to his friend's house that night. He hasn't changed his clothes. Police 101 stuff, right? Pretty amazing.
So he either did it or he's the world's
slipperiest criminal.
Yeah.
He's Houdini.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to say that he did it in the nude. That's what they're going to say. That he took all his clothes off, killed her, washed up, got his clothes back on. He did all this in 9 minutes. 55 stab wounds, right?
Wow.
What they do have are those bloody slippers that are in the back of his closet. So let's talk about those a little bit. There's no blood on the bottom of the slippers. And I have a photo. I'll post it in the In-Laws and Outlaws. There's only blood on the sides of the slippers, like the blood was placed there intentionally.
Right.
Again, police work 101.
Right.
Joel Schwartz noticed that during one of the interviews with Pam, where she's such a cool cat, when she's asked about the fact that Betsy's family thinks it's a bit hinky that she was suddenly in the last days of her life and made the new beneficiary of the life insurance policy her, Pam's like, well, it really hurts my feelings that they would think anything about that, and said, quote, I didn't put a gun to her head to make her sign the form, end quote.
Just a knife.
What? I didn't put a gun to her head and make her sign the form.
Wow.
The police tell Pam, it's okay. It's normal for a grieving family to act out like this.
Jeez.
But Russ's new defense attorney is going to go through all this information, and he's wondering, why did Pam tuck Betsy in on the couch in the blanket to sleep and then call her later to check in on her when it would only wake her up? Remember, she's tired. She's drained from chemo session that day. And Joel Schwartz also wants to know what his client, Russ, thinks about Pam.
Right.
What do you think about her, Russ? And Russ says that Pam's a nice lady and he's never had an issue with her at all. But Russ does tell Joel that Pam isn't Betsy's best friend. And if you think about it, if your best friend's having a celebration of life vacation after she's found out that her cancer is back, it's the last big hurrah for her, and Pam wasn't there. And I mean, if my best friend was dying, I'd be there. And I thought about this. When you were diagnosed and you were having a brain tumor removed within days, your best friends flew in from all across the country to be there at a moment's notice with you.
Yeah, my best buds, Jim, John, and Billy.
Pam is nowhere to be found, and she's the beneficiary of the life insurance policy.
She was counting her money.
Yeah, it's all wrong. And State Farm pays out the money to Pam because the police assure State Farm that Pam isn't a suspect in any way in the death of Betsy. So Russ is hanging on to this fraying rope of a life while he's being accused of murdering his wife, trying to scrape together the money to defend his life, and Pam's $150,000 richer.
What a nightmare.
Now, Joel Schwartz goes looking for the polygraph results for Russ, and what he finds out is that Russ admitted that he had been smoking weed that night with his buddies, remember? But he had been up for 33 hours straight after finding his dead wife. And then what Joel Schwartz finds out is that the polygraph test was fake. And, and apparently this tactic is legal as long as it's disclosed that they're not taking real results and they tell him so.
Wow.
So when Joel wants video or audio of the test results, they wouldn't give him anything. And police said that the audio and video of that particular test wasn't working and that they couldn't find the actual results. This is going to happen a lot, by the way. And that there were notes that stated that Russ had consented to the test and that his answers he gave were consistent psychological responses indicative of deception. Because Russ knows he's innocent, he waits before he asks for an attorney. Because he knows he's innocent. So he takes his polygraph and does all this. So here's if you take anything away from this podcast, always ask for an attorney. If you are accused of something, call an attorney. Always ask for an attorney, innocent or guilt, especially if you're innocent. Yeah. Think about this guy getting railroaded.
Man, this guy was screwed 6 ways from Sunday.
But Russ's buddies have his alibi, and Russ even says that he'll take another polygraph test. But prosecution's like, nah, we don't need that. We don't need another one.
Okay, let me backtrack here just for a little bit. So when they gave him the polygraph test, it was 4
questions, if you remember.
Right, and it was totally bogus then, right? But they told him that he was lying, so they didn't disclose that it was...
Right, because that's when they were like, this is Russ. We know God's in this room. God knows what you did. Remember all of that?
Wow.
So they were just trying to coerce him into saying, I'm guilty. I did it. They wanted a confession. So that was part of their whole confession tactic.
Wow.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go from the Gestapo to the prosecution team. Woohoo. I give you Leah Askey. Miss Askey has been practicing 18 months when this murder lands on her desk. She graduated from law school, opened her own practice, and then ran for DA and won by the slimmest of margins, I might add. And she is who used Officer Ryan McCarrick's times and dates as grounds to file the charges of first-degree murder against Russ.
Wow.
And here's what McCarrick gives to the DA. This is what he gives to DA Askey. The recounting statements by the last person to see Betsy alive, Pam Hupp. Here we go. Quote, Russ Faria was not very nice to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth said she was thinking of leaving Russell. Upset, Elizabeth was growing increasingly uncomfortable with Russell. Upset, Elizabeth told her of an incident that occurred the week before Elizabeth's death, where Russell put a pillow over her face and told Elizabeth that was what it would feel like to die. Upset, Elizabeth was planning to change the beneficiary information for her insurance policies, which at the time of her death listed Russell as the primary beneficiary. However, I've said there were delays in the changes because Elizabeth started to be very cautious of the business she conducted on the computer. She said this because she believed Russell was monitoring her emails, end quote.
Okay.
So this is all from Pam. This is what Officer McCarrick puts together, hands over to DA Askey. It's all circumstantial evidence, and it's all from Pam.
Well, I was just about ready to say that. They're basing an entire case, a murder case, on one person's testimony.
They're basing an entire murder case on the murderer.
Yeah. Well,
that's crazy. That's what's happening.
Yeah. And they haven't even investigated her.
No. Well, they've cleared her. Yeah. She's just walking around with her big gulp and
Jeez. Wow.
Pam also gives information in another interview with police where she tells Sergeant Ryan McCarrick of her many personal issues, the things that she's juggling. Pam's selling a house. She's buying a new house. She had her own medical issues. And in fact, also hanging over dear old Pam's head, she's handling the financial affairs of her mother, who is suffering from dementia and Alzheimer's while living in a residential care center. That's called foreshadowing. In the middle of explaining all this, Pam casually tells the police officer, quote, and if I hate to say, wanted money, my mom is worth $500,000 that I get when she dies. My mom has dementia and half the time doesn't know who we are. I know this sounds morbid and stuff like that, but I'm a life insurance person. But if I really wanted money, there was an easier way than trying to combat somebody that's physically stronger than me. I'm just saying, end quote.
Oh, just amazing.
She also at one point tells police that she herself doesn't have life insurance, but her husband does. And isn't that amazing that he is still alive?
What?
That's what she says to police.
Ballsy. Wow.
When defense attorney Joel Schwartz deposes Detective McCarrick, he point blank asks him if he believes Pam Hupp. And McCarrick says, yeah. And when Schwartz asks if Pam had ever told him that she'd been fired from not one but two jobs for forging signatures while working for insurance companies, McCarrick goes, no. And he asked McCarrick about Pam's so-called brain injury. Has McCarrick seen evidence that Pam has a brain injury? Quote, no, but I've also not gone through all her medical records, end quote. So Schwartz asked the obvious question, have you asked for her medical records? Nope.
Gosh, what a detective.
So then Joel Schwartz deposes Pam, March 20th, 2013, and he says, quote, what's your disability? And then she says, I'm not sure what they classify it as. I know I have a drop foot and balance problems. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
It happened, she said, when she tripped at work, hit her head on the filing cabinet November of 2009. She's filed for workers' comp. All of that is still pending. So he says, you have a head injury. And Pam says, yes. And he says, what's your head injury? And she says, I have no idea. How do you know if you have memory issues? And here it is, quote, well, because you're asking me questions and I don't remember, end quote.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Then she goes through the whole thing again about her husband. She says that she doesn't believe in life insurance. She doesn't have it. She didn't believe in it for herself. Her husband, however, did have life insurance. And, quote, amazingly, he's still alive because it's a lot, end quote. And Joel Schwartz is like, excuse me?
Amazingly?
Squeeze me? Yeah. What did you just say? And she said, I said, amazingly, he's still alive because it's a lot. And I sold it to him, so... And Joel Schwartz says, well, what do you mean by that? And she says, I mean, I guess if I wanted a lot of money, I could kill him instead of her. And Joel Schwartz says, instead of who? And Pam Hupp says, Betsy. And Joel Schwartz says to her, who said you killed Betsy? Pam Hupp says, you did, or your private detectives told my friends that. And Joel asks, and you didn't kill Betsy? She says, I did not kill Betsy.
Well, she kind of admitted it and then retracted. And then,
she's all over the place.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah.
But then she says, I didn't kill Betsy. And Joel says, quote, you still willing to take a polygraph, end quote. And Pam says,
no way, Jose.
No.
Yeah.
Then Pam tells how Betsy's family had harassed her for the money and said that, her phone started ringing. It was her family. It was her father, her mother, her sisters calling, pay for the funeral, pay for this, pay for that. And she said, I was like, quote, I'm not paying for a funeral that her husband killed her. I'm sorry. That's my view, end quote.
Well, and she's talking about her best friend.
Yeah. Supposedly.
Yeah.
Now, before the trial happens, these police officers, Sergeant McCarrick, they speak to Pam saying that they need to hammer out some of the discrepancies in her comments to various detectives. They actually come to her and say, look, Pam, we need you to get your story straight.
We're going to coach you a little bit here to make sure that...
Oh, the coaching is off the wall. And when they get together with her... McCarrick tells Pam that Russ's family has spent a lot of money to lawyer up, and he tells Pam, quote, their whole job is to make sure that Russ is not prosecuted for murder and to try to find somebody else on the planet to blame him so their client gets off. And he says, you've seen TV. You know how these things go, what they try to do. And he tells Pam that Russ's attorney, Joel Schwartz, would put his mother up for the murder if he could get his client off. That was a quote.
So where were these police officers trained? I mean, what, Foot Locker or Walmart? I mean, this is ridiculous.
I mean, I've only been to Writers Police Academy, and I think I could do a better job. I think everybody out there who's seen this case or knows anything about this case feels like they probably could have done a better job.
Yeah.
But these cops are worried about this insurance policy because it really hurts their whole Russ is a murdering SOB, because what was the motive? And they tell Pam that the insurance policy is going to be huge in the case. And the biggest doubt that defense is going to try to create is that you wound up being the benefactor of $150,000 in cash. Mm-hmm. And Pam's like, yeah. And they say to her, what you're originally telling investigators is that she wanted you to do this to make sure that her kids are taken care of because she's afraid Russ and the kids will blow through it. However, now you have this money and have not turned any of this money over to the family or the kids. And she refused to pay for
the funeral. Right. Yeah.
And Pam says that's correct. And Officer McCarrick says, that's a huge problem. I'm not telling you that you've got to do that. I'm just telling you that it's going to be a huge issue of doubt in court because by your own volition, meaning by your own will, Betsy has told you that she wants you to hold on to this money to make sure the family, that the girls are taken care of, yet they haven't seen a dime of the money.
Right.
And then Pam says, well, if you look at my wording, it wasn't exactly what she wanted me to make sure the girls are taken care of. And Pam starts rattling off a bunch of stuff to justify not giving the girls anything and says, not that she didn't want me to help or do whatever I wanted with it. This is a quote, do not let them get their hands on it or the family because the family will give it to them. That was her major concern, that they will piss it away, end quote.
Okay, that clears everything up. Not.
Pam tells police that $150,000 isn't a lot of money. That's just not a lot of money to her. She's got money, and $150,000 is not a lot of money, but she hasn't spent a dime of it. But Pam had put her house up for sale. She'd bought a new house. She insisted that she hadn't used any of the insurance money for the new house, and in fact had paid $65,000 less for it than she made from the sale of her previous home. So she got lots going on, new cars, new house, all this stuff. But she said, I didn't use that $150,000 because I don't need to use it because I have money. $150,000 is nothing to me.
Can't they trace that?
Well, it's in her account.
I know, but
they would have to subpoena her bank records. Yeah.
Then why isn't somebody issuing a subpoena?
Because they're not even looking at her.
Yeah, okay.
Then the detective tells her that it's important for Pam to help the prosecution's case against Russ and set up an irrevocable trust for the girls before the trial starts. So here we go. They're saying to her, you need to set this up because you need to help us out. You need to help the prosecution's case out.
Right.
When they talk to Pam about the timing, Pam starts rambling about the timing of the change in beneficiaries and Betsy's murder. And again, it seemed really self-incriminating, and the police are just like trying to get her to come up with one cohesive story. And she keeps launching into these crazy diatribes. Quote, she has to be killed. How does that work? She has to be killed or they'll receive the beneficiary form before she's killed. Otherwise, he's still the beneficiary. So why wouldn't I wait a few more days? I mean, that's practical to me. Why didn't I just wait until Friday to be sure they got it? End quote. So she's saying, if I really wanted to kill her, I would have waited to make sure that they got the papers that I was the beneficiary. Police want Pam to commit to one story, one narrative, because she's given so many. Pam starts to make her disapproval of Russ the centerpiece of her relationship with Betsy. She says, quote, this is going to sound bad. Me and Betsy are very different people. We come from different worlds. We like each other genuinely. I just didn't really care for Russ that much or his type. And this is when he called him a Hoosier, meaning he was a redneck. She calls him a Hoosier.
Right.
He's a hillbilly. And she's superior to Russ and Betsy. That's what she's basically saying.
She sounds like it. Yeah.
2 weeks after McCarrick's interview with Pam, he files a 3.5-page single-spaced report detailing Pam's recollections, Pam's comments, Pam's explanations in response to all his questions. It's very incredibly obvious they're railroading Russ.
Yeah, and it sounds like that train has left the station.
9 months after Betsy's murder, Russ is still sitting in the Troy County Jail under a $1 million cash bond.
Wow.
Schwartz gets this reduced to $25,000, which is still too high for Russ to pay, and so he continued to sit in jail.
Jeez.
Then at the end of his bail hearing, Joel Schwartz overhears Leah Askey say to a colleague, speaking of him, she's speaking of Joel, quote, he's the biggest asshole defense lawyer I've ever encountered. And Joel breezes past her and replies, quote, your depth perception is miserable when you whisper, and you're wrong. I'm not even in the top 3 assholes in my office, end quote.
Nice. I like this guy.
Oh, goodness. Now, the DA, Miss Leah Askey, she didn't want to prosecute this case in front of this one judge. He was getting ready to retire, and she didn't think it would bode well for her, and she wanted this clean-cut conviction. So she delays the November 27th trial date on November 16th, dismissing the charges against Russ on the grounds that the prosecution had decided not to prosecute them. That canceled the scheduled trial before the retiring judge. Then she asks a grand jury to return a new but identical indictment against Russ on the same charges on the same day to restart the process. And on December 5th, a new judge is assigned to the case.
There's a special place in hell for prosecutors.
I mean,
like
that is awful. But here's who is assigned. Circuit Judge Christina Kunze Minnemeyer. She was elected a month earlier, had never participated in a jury trial, and Russ's case would be her very first criminal law case. Also, folks, she's Leah Askey's, the DA, childhood friend.
Well, there you go. And absolutely no conflict of interest.
Joel Schwartz, for the defense, is deposing all the players in this upcoming trial. Meanwhile, you'd think a dead best friend would be the weirdest occurrence. But on October 30th, 2013, while Russ is sitting in the county jail awaiting trial, Pam is busy taking care of her mother. Remember the one she said was worth a ton of money?
Yeah.
Pam drops off her mother, Shirley Newman, at the Lake Park Independent Senior Living Community near Fenton, Missouri. And when Pam drops off her mother, she tells the staff not to expect her mom for dinner that night or breakfast the next morning. Shirley is found dead at 2:30 in the afternoon the next day by a housekeeper on the grounds. The railings on her balcony were broken, and she was dead from blunt force trauma from hitting the ground, like she fell from the balcony. When an autopsy is performed, Miss Shirley had 8 times the usual dosage of Ambien in her system, which is a sleeping medication. Funny thing, the railing is really made to withstand somebody running into it, especially like a 77-year-old woman.
Right.
But the railing was missing, and how much force was needed for her to trip and fall over that and punch out the rails? I mean...
So the rails weren't there.
So you have the horizontal across the top, the railing, and then the
post.
The vertical post underneath it.
Right.
So the railing is still there, and the vertical post, there's some vertical posts missing.
Wow.
Like they'd been kicked out.
So was her mother like a former linebacker or something?
No, and it's funny because I actually wrote in here that very same thing. Like, she's not Trent Brown at the Patriots. I mean, I even wrote that in there because he's like 6'8", 375.
And by the way, my wife loves football, which is just one more reason why I love my wife. Yeah.
She's a 77-year-old woman with 8 times the amount of Ambien. She could have bounced when she hit because she had to have been completely lax.
Yeah.
But don't forget, Pam's made a statement to the police after Betsy's murder, quote, "If I hate to say it, wanted money, my mom's worth $500,000 when she dies." And guess what? Now Shirley's dead.
There you go.
Now, in the beginning, Pam Hupp and her family, her brothers and sisters, they're going to file a lawsuit against the Senior Living Center, a wrongful death suit. So can you say money hungry?
Wow.
But when the medical examiner gets going, they change the cause of death from accidental to undetermined. And to date, no one has been charged with anything in the matter of Shirley Newman's death.
Is it still an ongoing?
It is.
There you go.
You can bet your boots Pam got her payout, though. Now, while Russ is awaiting trial, it's important to know that Betsy's family is on board with him being the killer. And when Joel Schwartz speaks to Janet, Betsy's mom, she even says that she knows that Russ did it and that it was a, quote, crime of passion. And Joel Schwartz is like, who told you that? How did you hear that phrase, crime of passion? And he's pretty sure that the police and Leah Askey, they've all been, Betsy's family, they've all been fed this line of
Right.
Now, Janet did call Pam a money-hungry bitch, which I thought was kind of funny when I was reading through all of the police reports. But yeah, a money-hungry bitch. And when Joel presses Janet, Betsy's mom, a little bit on how she came to her conclusion that Russ found out that Betsy had changed the beneficiary and was furious, and that was why he killed her, he offers up some names. Was it Leah Askey? Was it Mr. Hicks? That's Leah Askey's co-counsel. Okay. Nope. It was Officer McCarrick, Ryan McCarrick.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is the guy Joel Schwartz calls Ryan McCarrick the big bald cop in his book, which is pretty funny.
Training by Foot Locker.
Yes. There are also rumors, all of which Leah Askey has denied, that she and the then captain of investigations at the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office, his name was Mike Lang, that these two were having an affair.
Well, this is like Peyton Place.
It's so like Peyton Place.
Wow.
So small town, everybody's up in your business, not really on the up and up, easy to conspire against one guy, railroad him into a murder conviction, and that's exactly what they're going to do. McCarrick is going to state that the major case squad gave them 105 leads. But when he's pressured, Joel Schwartz gets him to say that it's not based on one single fact.
It's all hearsay.
105 leads, 0 facts, and all the leads come from Pam Hupp.
Imagine that.
And all those conflicting stories from Pam, well, Officer McCarrick called them, quote, subtle differences. And McCarrick agrees that he asked Pam 3 or 4 times to get the trust put together for the girls before they went to trial because it would be helpful. So he does admit to it.
Wow.
Yeah. This trial begins on November 18th, 2013, and here's how the prosecution, the young DA Leah Askey, is going to lay out the facts for the jury of 7 men and 5 women. She opens by telling the jury that the motive was greed. She tells the jury that all the witnesses are going to say that Russ is crude, that he cusses, he smokes pot, he has a temper, he had a ton of school loan debt, and he killed his wife believing that he was the beneficiary of her life insurance policy. His 2 stepdaughters were now convinced that Russ had murdered their mother, and they were ready to tell the jury that their life with Betsy and Russ, quote, wasn't the Brady Bunch.
Wow.
Joel Schwartz objected 3 times during her opening statement and even asked for a mistrial based on one of Leah Askey's opening remarks, which was that Russ was aware of 3 life insurance policies, and they'd been told in a sidebar conference, including one that very morning, that it was prohibited for either side to discuss the insurance policies.
Wow.
And here's why. Because Joel wanted to bring up the fact that the $150,000 policy had been changed to Pam.
Right.
Just days before the murder. And the judge said no.
Ugh.
But suddenly it was A-OK for Leah Askey to use it for her own benefit. And the jury was asked to disregard the statement. Just you didn't hear that. Just go on. You didn't hear that. And there's a lot of this. And the long and the short of it is this. Joel Schwartz and Russ Faria got the hometown call. They're getting homered from the judge, for sure, from the police, absolutely. And when Pam Hupp takes the stand, she starts off with all her injuries and the plate in her head and blah, blah, blah. It's all about Pam.
Wow.
She gives her story. Russ is mean. She doesn't like Russ. Betsy's afraid of Russ. And when Joel Schwartz gets her on the stand and starts uncovering all the lies Pam has told, all the contradictions, he reads from her statements, and Pam's not happy about it. So she gives a lot of, I don't remember answers. I don't remember that. I don't know. I don't remember.
Because of her brain injury.
Because of her plate in her head, apparently. She got a drop foot plate in her head, and yeah. But Joel is using Pam's words and all the different testimonies that she gives to put her at the house at the time of Betsy's murder.
Right.
And Leah Askey's story for the jury is that whoever killed Betsy murdered her, showered, cleaned up, and let the dog out after. And Russ was the only one who would know where the towels were in the house and would be able to control the dog. And she says she's going to talk about bloodstains that have been washed out and wiped off or are invisible to the naked eye. They're never going to be able to prove this, by the way.
Yeah, this is the problem when you get your law degree from Waffle House. And don't email me. I love Waffle House.
But she went to a good school. That's not it. She's just, she's one, I don't know. Everybody's one brick shy of a load. The list is long of people who should be flogged for this. So they talk about, all the blood stains that were washed out and wiped off. And this house, Betsy and Russ's house, showed a glowing path of cleaned up blood evidence. But the police camera had malfunctioned and there were no photos of this. And the lab test couldn't confirm the presence of blood on the kitchen floor or on the towel bar or even in the drain pipe of the shower. So if he did it naked and got in the shower, they still couldn't prove that there was blood in the shower.
Right.
There were no bloody footprints. There were no footprints that matched the blood on the slippers found in the back of the closet. None of this is going to deter DA Askey from using it as a talking point. She's also going to say that there were, this is great. She's also going to say that there were 8 sperm cells in Betsy's body. So Russ must have had sex with Betsy right before he stabbed her. Now, they gave him 9 minutes, nothing against this guy, but it gets worse here. But and I'm not a biologist, I'm not a doctor, but if you've had sex and only 8 sperm cells are present,
yeah.
And I looked this up, do you want to guess how many sperm cells are in one ejaculation? And yes, I just said that word.
Well, I'm going to say it's more than 8.
It's 100 million.
Well, there you go.
That is the average. A healthy male adult can release between 40 million and 1.2 billion in a single, you know what. And and they found 8.
They found 8 of them. Well, there you go. That's some good detective work right there.
They found 8 on the autopsy exam, and the DA is going to spin the story that Russ forced himself on Betsy in that one last show of dominance.
Wow.
And more likely, they had sex in the past 2 or 3 days. And Russ said, yeah, they were intimate on Sunday night. On Christmas night, they had sex. And honestly, telling you that one little snippet of this case should tell you everything that you need to know.
Yeah.
They're hanging their hopes on really skimpy facts.
They're just trying to come up with anything that's going to stick to the wall.
Well, it's all information that anybody else would dismiss, but their case is all circumstantial. And circumstantial evidence and 8 sperm cells.
Jeez.
Not to mention the timetable, because he's been at his bro night and been to Arby's, and he's got a time-stamped receipt, and he's on CCTV from the convenience store where he stopped for cigarettes. And they're also saying that he had time to rape her.
Wow.
And I'm not saying that, you might be able to have sex in 9 minutes, but you're not going to have time to kill her, clean up, call 911.
Did they interview the sperm cells?
They did not. They were not available for interview.
Just checking. Thank you.
The time that they're giving him to do all of this, the Arby's receipt said 9:09. Then he had to drive 23 minutes at the very least from O'Fallon to Troy, where he killed, cleaned up, showered, and called 911 at 9:41. So that's from then to 9:40, from 9:09 to 9:40. That gives him 5 to 10 minutes to do everything, and she was stabbed 55 times. And he's high from smoking weed. So remember, they like to throw that in too. He was smoking weed, and he was high, and
Wow.
Leah Askey's going to say that Russ's weed-smoking buddies are covering for him or are his accomplices in this crime. I am not even kidding you.
Wow. They're going to drag anybody they can into this thing.
Yeah. When they get to the part about setting up the trust fund for the girls, Pam says it was done in June or July of 2013. Betsy was murdered in 2011. She actually set up a trust 2 weeks before the trial.
Why'd she wait so long?
Because she kept the money.
Gotcha.
And then the judge ruled that the jury could not know that Pam was the last person to see Betsy alive.
What?
And when a reporter, his name is Chris Hayes from Fox 2, finds out that Pam was the new beneficiary and she was the last one to see Betsy alive, because a lot of this, they discuss it, the jury's out of the room.
Sure.
But Chris Hayes from Fox 2 is sitting there, and he's listening to all this, and he loses his mind. He's thinking what everybody else is thinking right now. Why isn't the jury hearing this, and why isn't anybody looking at Pam?
Right.
And he's saying there's zero evidence that points to Russ. And the judge wouldn't allow for any of the real information to be given to the jury, that the insurance policy changed to Pam 3 days before the murder. But Judge Christina Kunza Minnemeyer kept to her decision, barring testimony that would establish a murder motive for Pam Hupp.
What was her reasoning behind that?
She never gives a reasoning.
Wow.
Yeah. Just that, she wasn't on trial. Pam Hupp was not on trial. Russ was on trial.
It wasn't pertinent.
I guess.
Wow.
All along the way, Joel Schwartz is filing motions for acquittals because the state is failing to prove not just their case, but even the charges against him beyond a reasonable doubt. Like, there wasn't even enough evidence to charge him in the first place. But in closing arguments, Leah Askey says that the gamer role dude playing Russ, she called him the gamer role-playing dude. Yeah. The gamer role-playing dude Russ used Betsy's death as the ultimate role play and dragged his bro night buddies, which included a woman, I should make that clear. There was a woman that plays games with him, but she drags them into the whole setup.
Wow.
And Joel brings that up at the very beginning of his closing argument. And Askey talked about reasonable doubt, and Joel Schwartz wants to talk about proof.
Right.
The closing arguments were ugly. Leah Askey was ugly, and he was appalled at the injustice and ineptitude of the court in Lincoln County. It was so bad that Mike Wood, who was the assistant prosecuting attorney under Leah Askey, was so embarrassed at her performance, which is what it was, a performance, that a month later he left her office and became the assistant prosecuting attorney at the neighboring county, St. Charles.
Wow.
So that's how bad it was. He was embarrassed.
Yeah.
The trial begins November 18th. It's over on the 21st in the blink of an eye. And in 4.5 hours, They deliberated 4.5 hours. Russ is found guilty of murder in the first, and they give him life without parole.
Wow.
And when Joel Schwartz gives a statement to the press, he says, quote, there was evidence pointing toward another, but the court kept that out, end quote.
Wow.
Schwartz is going to file an 11-page motion that just rips the judge and the DA to shreds and explains that the judge had barred evidence that would have given him the chance to present a Saudi defense.
Right.
Some other guy did it.
Right.
Saudi, S-O-D-D-I.
Right.
He also made a list of Judge Minnemeyer's errors. The case is such a catastrophe that when Chris Hayes of Fox 2 News starts covering it, that Dateline NBC catches wind of the story. And then on November 14th, 2014, a year after Russ is convicted, Keith Morrison is in the sound booth doing his voiceovers.
Wow.
And Dateline NBC is on the case.
That's when you know you're in trouble.
Yeah. Now, in the summer of 2014, Betsy's daughters file a civil suit against Pam for the money. They want the money. Where's the money that my mom left me? They're both over 18. They're both paying their own way in life. They want their money.
They're going to pull a Cuba Gooding Jr.
Yeah,
on her.
show me the money. Yes. Enter David Bush, attorney for Betsy's daughters. They file suit against Pam for the $150,000 because after Russ's murder conviction, you can bet your ass she emptied out that account, that trust account.
Oh, yeah.
She emptied it out except for $300.
Jeez.
But David Bush and Joel Schwartz are friends, and he calls Joel to get the lowdown on Pam Hupp and gets an earful.
Yeah.
And when Bush deposes Pam, he gets all the same round and round doublespeak. But Pam testifies in her deposition that shortly after Russ was convicted, she revoked the trust she had set up for Leah and Mariah and threw all the money except for $300 of the $100,000 she'd deposited into her own account, her personal checking account that she shared with her husband, Mark, and that she used the money to pay her bills and to invest in real estate.
And her reasoning for this was just because it was hers?
Because she signed it and it signed it over to her and yep.
Wow.
But there's more. Pam also testified that the only reason she opened the trust was because of pressure from Sergeant Ryan McCarrick and DA Leah Askey. Oops. And that McCarrick had told her it would make the murder case against Russ look better at trial if she set up the trust.
Oops.
That's a big oops, but it opens a door.
Yep.
And on December 1st, 2014, Joel Schwartz files a 74-page appeal. This new information about the police and the DA wanting her to set up the trust, along with the other many errors that he cited from the first trial, gets Russ a new trial based on something called a Mooney motion from the state of Missouri.
What's a Mooney motion?
A Mooney motion is where if evidence is discovered after the trial that could have resulted in an acquittal, if they find it, they have to give him a new trial.
Gotcha.
And on February 4th, 2015, he files the Mooney motion, and Chief Appellate Judge Angela T. Quiglis orders Russ's case to be sent back to trial court for a decision on a new trial. So it's like, I say yes, go back, we got to get another decision. And the reporters are all over this. And in fact, after 2 weeks, Russ, who'd been in a state prison for 14 months and 2 years in the county jail, does get a new trial.
Okay.
Now, the new trial is going to focus on Pam Hupp's self-incriminating lies and Askey and McCarrick pressuring her to help the state's case by opening the trust account. And surprise, surprise, Judge Christina Kunzen-Minnemeyer recuses herself from the trial. She's like, not me this time, not me.
Wiping my hands from it. I'm out.
And also around this time, in the months following, various other cases which were overseen by Judge Minnemeyer were overturned by the Court of Appeals. And in January of 2017, the Supreme Court of Missouri found that she had, quote, violated the Judicial Code of Ethics, end quote, and was given a 6-month suspension.
Oh, that's it?
6-month suspension. I mean, how horrible is that? You are such a bad judge, not just this case, but many cases that you have sat as judge on. You suck. You're out for 6 months.
Yeah, it sounds
you're
like
right. You're on the bench.
The things that she did, she should have been disbarred.
Well, there's a lot of that in here. No one's been disbarred.
All right.
St. Louis Circuit Judge Stephen Omer, who'd been on the bench for 2 years, was on the job. Russ's conviction was overturned and a new trial date was set for November 2nd, 2015. Russ is set free on a $500,000 bond and paid $17,000 in cash to be able to go home while awaiting trial.
Wow.
His sister-in-law, I believe Mary Anderson is her name. She's the one who puts her house up, I think, as collateral.
Gotcha.
And he goes back to his parents' house in O'Fallon. Now, there are new police interviews with Pam, and this time Pam tells police that she and Betsy were lesbian lovers.
Wow.
Quote.
I didn't see that one coming.
Yep, they're lesbian lovers. Quote, she really, really, really loved me. As her marriage started deteriorating, I would step in and help her even there. Almost kind of like, I guess in her mind, a boyfriend, a caretaker, end quote.
Well, okay.
Pam tells police that at first she resisted the physical turn in their relationship, but eventually entered into the sexual affair with Betsy. Quote, it was a progression more on her part because I love Betsy. I'm not in love with her. Never was in love with her. She was in love with me. And at that point, when I knew what was happening with her, I just let that go because it was a small, small thing to give her. I'm going to keep going. This is still her quote.
What a gal.
Ours wasn't about sex. It was about emotion. It's not a huge thing for me. Like I said, I'm not attracted to women, so it's not like I've ever been with anybody but Betsy. It's not the same. Never will probably again. It's just a weird circumstance. It's honestly a relationship with two women who really aren't attracted to women. I don't know how to explain that. It's not I'm not attracted to men. I love everything about them. Can't wait till Magic Mike XXL comes out.
Wow.
But she's the same way. It's not like she was a lesbian or anything. It wasn't like that. It was such an evolution of emotional trauma for her. End quote. Diarrhea of the mouth.
Man.
So she's saying we had a sexual relationship, but she loved me, but I like I'm sorry. I just was let me just boil that down. But it gets worse because in the same interview, Detective Patrick Harney tries to get Pam to change her statements in sworn testimony over the last 4 years by saying that she saw Russ at the house when she brought Betsy home that night. They're saying to her, change your story.
Wow.
Tell everybody that you actually saw Russ there.
But they've got the timeline of him being...
They didn't look at it the first time.
Wow.
Yeah. You need to say that you walked in, that you saw him there, that was the motivating factor for you to leave was him coming to the house. And Pam says, nope, I didn't see anybody. But this is an illegal attempt to influence a witness or to get a witness to lie.
Witness tampering.
Yeah. So it's just a completely different story from anything else she's ever told anyone, police, prosecution, anybody. And what she says is that before she gives this interview, that she went to Betsy's old house on the morning of the interview in an attempt to stimulate her memory and put herself back in the moment when she arrived and when she left. And that's when it came to her. That's when it came to her that there was possibly a light silver car with two men parked on Sumac Drive, which is where they lived, before she got to Betsy's house.
She was doing her own
hypnosis. Yeah, and self-hypnosis. And who does she say she sees in the car? Russ Faria.
Yeah.
Now, on November 2nd, 2015, the new trial begins. On November 6th, Russ is found not guilty on all charges.
Okay.
From the 2nd to the 6th, not guilty. And Joel Schwartz completely dismantles the police department, including Sergeant Ryan McCarrick.
Foot Locker guy.
Yeah. But the very first time Pam Hupp is questioned by the police right after Betsy's murder, she says, quote, maybe if you guys could find that letter she was going to send me, if she really has it or if she deleted it or whatever. She said she was going to talk to me about changing her beneficiaries, that he had started doing this weird thing with a pillow, but it had just started happening, end quote.
Okay.
So I don't know if you remember that from the first podcast, but she said, hey, there's this letter.
Yeah.
There's this letter. Maybe if you all can find this letter, you'll know who killed Betsy.
If I remember correctly, she couldn't print it out because his printer was...
Right. Well, she was afraid that Betsy was afraid because he was always on the computer.
Right.
And she didn't want him to see it.
Okay.
Well, computer experts say that the, quote, letter, I got my air quotes up. The letter was the only document on Betsy's computer that listed the author as unknown. All of the other documents were created under the same username of Betsy Faria and her ex-husband and a couple of other people. And the only way unknown would show up was if the document was created on another computer. The email, this letter, it ends with, quote, "If something happens to me, would you please show this to the police?" End quote. I have a picture of it. I will post it in the In-Laws and Outlaws.
Is this the unknown?
This is the unknown letter. If you find this letter, and it just talks about how it's supposed to be a letter from Betsy to Pam.
Yeah. Well, a little bit of computer forensics could probably trace where that letter came from.
Well, and here it is.
Here
the
we go.
document was created in Word 97, but Betsy's computer used Word 2003.
Uh-oh.
And at the same time the document was written, the computer was connected via Wi-Fi to the club, the tennis club. Remember, she went to watch her play tennis.
Yep.
It was written at the tennis club while Betsy was playing and Pam was watching.
Wow.
Then the cell phone data from the night Betsy died, Pam's 2 calls made at 7:04 and 7:27 were both made and pinged by the tower by the Faria's home, not in the location Pam said she was, at her home, on her way home. And Russ's phone, well, he had left it accidentally at his friend's house that night. But before that, it was everywhere he said he had gone, and the CCTV footage showed that he was. And when Pam is not called as a witness by Joel Schwartz, like she sits through the whole thing, can't go in, and Joel does not call her, she texts Joel's co-counsel, "What's the matter? Did Schwartz lose his balls?" Question mark.
She better be careful.
Listen, speaking of balls, the balls on this chick. Yeah. Russ Faria is found not guilty on all charges, and after that, Joel Schwartz makes a phone call to Richard Callahan, the U.S. attorney for the St. Louis District in eastern Missouri, to ask him to conduct a comprehensive review of all aspects of the Faria case, including the suspicious death of Pam Hupp's mother, saying, quote, "If Pam Hupp wasn't stopped, someone else was going to die." End quote.
Dun, dun, dun.
Now, after Russ is a free man, there's still the civil suit of the insurance money. And guess what? The judge rules that Pam's name was on the form, the signature was witnessed, and there was nothing in writing that said Pam was to give the $150,000 to Betsy's daughters. So she gets to keep it.
Wow.
But Joel Schwartz takes this matter into his own hands, alleging that the beneficiary form was incomplete, was not received by State Farm until after Betsy's death, and State Farm's investigation before paying out the $150,000 to Pam Hupp was inadequate. And 8 months later, State Farm settled the suit out of court for an undisclosed sum.
And that went to the girls.
Yes.
Okay.
Then Joel Schwartz went after prosecuting attorney Leah Askey and sheriff's detectives Ryan McCarrick, Mike Merkel, and Patrick Harney.
Good.
Schwartz, in his suit, charged that Askey and the detective, quote, fabricated evidence, ignored exonerating evidence, and failed to investigate the obvious suspect as part of the conspiracy to wrongly convict Russ Faria. This federal suit is filed on July 19th, 2016.
So not that long ago.
No. And then it gets weird.
Like we haven't had weird yet.
About to get weird.
Weirder.
On August 10th, a substitute teacher named Carol McAfee was sitting on her porch with her dog in the trailer hood when a blonde woman in a dark gray SUV pulls up in her driveway. Carol goes up to the car and says, "Can I help you?"
Mm-hmm.
And the woman says, "Do you babysit?" And Carol says, "No, I don't babysit." And the blonde woman says, quote, "Do you know what a soundbite is?"
What?
Yeah. And Carol says, "Yes, I know what a soundbite is. I'm not stupid." I love Carol, by the way.
Yeah.
You're all going to love Carol. Carol is a little bit of my hero.
Mm-hmm.
And the blonde woman tells Carol that she's a producer for Dateline and offered Carol $1,000 to help reenact a 911 call for the show. Quote, "It'll be cash under the table, no paper trail to Uncle Sam," end quote.
Okay.
Carol's interest is piqued, and she says, "Well, maybe I can help." And the blonde woman tells her, quote, "If you do, you can't bring your keys, your wallet, your cell phone, or any cigarettes. The producers hate clutter." And I have to say it again. Foreshadowing.
Okay.
Foreshadowing, foreshadowing, foreshadowing.
3 foreshadowings in one episode.
I mean, so much. Carol takes her dog inside the house, but takes a pocket knife with her and slips a steak knife in her hoodie. Then she punches 911 on her cell phone in her pocket without actually dialing. So she's going to go with this blonde woman who says she's with Dateline
Right.
for $1,000 cash.
But she's being cautious.
Taking some protection with her. And the blonde woman says, I'm Kathy. I'm from Chicago. But the tags on her car were Missouri. And there was no evidence inside the car that it was a rental car. You know, most rental cars, you get the keychains, got the tag. It looks like a rental car. It smells like a rental car. Right. Yeah. When Carol gets spooked, she tells Kathy that she needs to go home because she doesn't have any shoes on. She got in the car without shoes on. So Kathy takes her back to her trailer where Carol says, you know what? I'm out.
Yeah.
And then that's when Kathy notices, I keep throwing up my air quotes. Kathy notices that Carol has security cameras on her trailer. And when Kathy sees this, she gets back into her car and Carol says, quote, yes, I have security cameras and a knife in my pocket and I'm calling 911, end quote.
I like her.
In fact, Kathy had been trolling the whole area for over a week, looking for someone who wanted to make $1,000 by reenacting a crime for Dateline. One, she approached a service station, and the other while he was mowing his grass.
What?
Yeah. I'm Kathy. I'm with Dateline. Do you want to make $1,000? I need you to help me reenact a 911 call.
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm jumping ahead, but what does that have to do with anything?
Well, here we go.
Okay.
Tuesday, August 16th, 2016, the O'Fallon, Missouri 911 call center receives a call. And this is what she says.
Oh, I see it coming. Okay.
Hey, hello, there's someone busted in my house. Help. The voice is loud and excited, but oddly, and the word I read was flat for someone who is calling to report that someone is in their home. She doesn't seem all that scared. Quote, hey, help. And no, I'm not getting in the car with you. No, get away, get out. And 911 asks for the address. And in a soft voice, the caller says, no. And then louder says, no. And then for 15 seconds, there was nothing but 3 helps. Help.
Okay.
And 911 says, ma'am, can you hear me? And then there were 5 gunshots in rapid succession. And then another 7 seconds of silence. And finally, hello, I just shot an intruder in my house.
Wow.
End quote. And after a few more questions, which she answers calmly, she's asked her name. My name is Pam. And the 911 dispatcher didn't even ask for a last name.
She knew who it was. Oh, man. Yeah, that's when you don't want your reputation to precede you.
Yes. So hold that thought.
Okay.
I want everybody to meet Louis Royce Gumpenberger. Louis was born in 1983. He had 2 children. And in 2005, after a drunk driving crash that he caused, Louis had a traumatic brain injury. After his brain injury, Louis had problems with speech and balance, and he was weak on the left side of his body. Louis had the mental capacity of roughly a 12-year-old child.
Okay.
He had trouble walking and talking. He could not run. He could not drive or use a computer. And his writing skills were minimal, and they would drop off the page at an angle when he would write. It was just part of his traumatic brain injury.
No control.
He lived with his mother, Margaret Birch, and his son. She was the legal guardian of both of them. He also had a daughter that he didn't live with. But on the morning of August 16th, 2016, he waited with his son to catch the school bus. The neighbors would say that the last time they saw Louis, he was on the front porch smoking a cigarette. When Louis left that day, he was never seen again. He left behind his wallet, his keys, his cigarettes, his clutter.
Yeah.
When police arrive at Pam's house, she tells him that she's shot a man, that he's still lying in the hallway. She's pretty calm about this, by the way. She dropped the gun on the bed in the bedroom. It's a 5-shot black Ruger 38 caliber pistol, and the chamber is empty because Pam has fired every shot.
She unloaded.
And here's Pam's story. She's backing out of her driveway when a silver car with 2 men screeched to a stop at the end of her driveway, and the man who's now lying dead in her house races over, jumps into the passenger seat of her car, and the driver of the other car squeals off. And the man in the car called her a bitch, pushed a knife. He got one thing right. She got one thing right in this story, I'm telling you. The man in the car called her a bitch, pushed a knife into her throat as he yelled that she was going to drive him to her bank and, quote, Get Russ's money, end quote.
What?
Get Russ's money.
Okay.
She screams at him, knocks the knife out of his hand, and runs into the house. She tried 3 times to call 911 before somebody answered. And while on the phone with 911, she runs to her bedroom and gets her gun from the nightstand. And when the man comes barging into her room, she fires the gun as he advanced on her.
Okay.
He fell backward into the hallway, and she ran. Police ask her if she knows a, quote, Russ. And Pam says... What do you think she says?
At this point, I have no idea.
Quote, I don't know anyone named Russ. I don't know what he's talking about, end quote.
I should have said that to begin with. I just don't know which way to go with this thing anymore.
But when she gets down to the station, she tells police that she does know who he was talking about. Russ Faria. And according to the police, she was shedding a few tears, but seemed, quote, remarkably composed for the average housewife in middle America who had just pumped 5 rounds point blank into the chest of a man outside of her bedroom door, end quote.
Wow.
She also tells police that she doesn't want her interview to be recorded on video because she always ends up on the TV news. She's talking about Dateline. She knows they're following her.
Like she has a choice in that.
Yeah, well... She tells police that, yes, she now realizes that the Russ in her attacker's wild ramblings had to be, of course, Russ Faria. And the money in her bank account had to be, of course, the $150,000 she had received as beneficiary to Betsy Faria's insurance. She gives a description of the kidnapper's car. And she also gives a description of the guy who's driving the car. He's got dark hair, a buzz cut. He's got a Hispanic complexion. She's giving the description of Russ Faria, basically. Yeah.
Right.
But the O'Fallon Police Department soon starts putting together her story, and there's a growing list of discrepancies and evidence that don't hold water. By the way, the O'Fallon Police Department is not the Lincoln County Police Department.
Thank God.
2 different police departments. She shows the police how she held the gun with both hands as she shot the intruder, but she was still on the phone with 911 when she fired the gun. So how was she holding the gun and the phone and using both hands to shoot at the same time? They listen to her 911 call over and over and over and over, and people just aren't buying it because it seems more staged and scripted. Because these 911 operators are used to talking to people who are really in distress.
Of course.
The dead man didn't have any identification on him, but inside his pants pocket, there was a Ziploc plastic bag, and inside another plastic bag holding a ballpoint pen and a barely legible note scrolled on white notebook paper that appeared to be a detailed, grotesque instruction for the kidnapping.
Okay.
They were supposed to kidnap and murder. And Pam, in a striking, familiar manner, it sounds just like something she would actually write. And guess what? It's also written in script. Something that Lewis doesn't do.
Can't do. Yeah.
This is what the note says. Get Hupp in car in garage. Take to bank. Get rest of money. Should be 100 to 150,000. Take her back to house. Get rid of her. Make look like Russ' wife. Make sure knife is sticking out of neck.
Man.
Also inside the same plastic bag were 9 crisp, new $100 bills. But when the police searched the crime scene, what did they find in Pam's dresser drawer? 3 $100 bills and 4 $50 bills. One of the $100 bills bore a serial number ending with 712B. 5 of the $100 bills in the man's pocket were the consecutive serial numbers ending in 713B.
That was just coincidence.
Yeah. She's given him the money or planted it on him. The knife she said she knocked out of the man's hand in her car was found not in the floor or in the back seat, but suspended blade down by the handle in the small space between the passenger seat and the console in the same position as several knives in her kitchen, blades down, suspended by the handles in small spaces between the counter and the stove. So she's using that little slit between her counter and her stove to put her knives. She did the same thing in the car.
Wow.
Now, police realize that this is Louis Royce Gumpenberger, and when they go to see his mother, Margaret, she is basically destroyed.
Sure.
But then Margaret just takes apart all of Pam's accounts of what could have possibly happened because Louis has a traumatic brain injury and has the mental capacity of a 12-year-old.
Right.
He's very friendly. He's gullible, and other people sometimes took advantage of him, but he was not a killer. And Lewis's doctors confirm his mental and physical limitations. So police track Pam's movement by mapping her cell phone activity, and they place her in the parking lot of his apartment building 4 minutes between...
Jeez.
4 minutes before, between 11:25 and 11:29, 40 minutes before the shooting. She went and picked him up.
I was going to say she should have taken her own advice and not brought the phone.
Yeah, exactly.
What an idiot.
Pam had driven to his apartment complex, picked him up, drove him to her home, shot him to death in the hallway, all in about 40 minutes.
Wow.
But then someone remembers the call that they got 6 days ago. A woman named Carol McAfee, who sat on her porch with her dog, was approached by a blonde woman asking if she wanted to be a part of a Dateline NBC episode. They interview Carol. They look at the video from Carol's security cameras. They see that it's Pam. They see that the license plate on the car matches a car that is registered to Pam and Mark Hupp.
Wow.
So the police start looking at surveillance footage of cameras between the homes and businesses along the route between Lewis's apartment and Pam's house. And what they find is that they can actually see Pam in her car with Lewis sitting next to her.
Wow.
So this is open and shut, right?
Yeah.
The police department is getting it done, and Detective Russ McDermott searched the online source for the knife with the 5-inch blade. It was made by Royal Norfolk Cutlery, which Pam said Lewis had used. So this is this knife she said that he used.
Okay.
He locates this knife at Dollar General stores, and the manager of the nearest Dollar General store documented the sale of 3 knives in the last month, and Pam's cell phone records put her at the store 7 times between August 2nd and August 16th.
Wow.
Including the morning of the shooting.
Bum, bum, bum.
Oh, it gets better. The manager showed a cash sale of $8.64 on August 8th, the same day, and it included a knife and 6 other items. And where did they find the 6 other items, you might ask?
At Pam's house?
At Pam's house in a closet. The chickens are coming home to roost.
She couldn't leave well enough alone.
Right. And then there's the note, a handwriting expert who compared Pam's handwritten phrases from one note to the other. His conclusion is Pam wrote the note.
Yeah.
It's about this time that Russ Faria catches wind that Pam has shot a man in her home who was looking for, quote, Russ's money. And the O'Fallon Police Department calls Russ and says, hey, can you come down to the police department for an interview? Now, Russ goes, but he takes with him one of his original attorneys. Joel Schwartz was out of town, so one of his partners goes with him. He did not go into this police department by himself.
Yeah, fool me once.
And you can't blame him.
Right.
But he was very open. He accounted for his day, what he'd done that day, that Lewis was shot. He even gave them handwriting samples, left and right hands. And police quickly say, there's no link between you and Lewis. Now, police now know that Pam has orchestrated this whole thing. And on Monday, August 22nd, Pam is charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. Coincidentally, these are the same charges that were filed against Russ Faria. And police decide, in the beginning, they decide they're going to keep their decision quiet, that they're going to arrest Pam. So what they're going to do is set up surveillance on her house just in case she tries to leave.
Right.
And just before 11 a.m. on Tuesday, August 23rd, Pam backs out of her garage and starts to drive away. And patrol officers pull her over, block her from her home, tell her she's under arrest. And I thought it was funny because I found in here that she was wearing an orange T-shirt and denim capri pants with fashionably torn knees. She's placed in the front seat of an unmarked police car, and as they're driving away, Pam says, quote, there's a camera. I don't want to be on camera, end quote.
Taking narcissism to a whole new level.
Now, when they arrive at the police station, they put Pam in an interrogation room, and the police officer who's taking notes accidentally leaves behind a ballpoint pen. And when he walks out, Pam takes the ballpoint pen and hides it. She picks it up, puts it in the back of her pants. And when police come back, she says, I need to pee. Then she tells police that, I thought this was funny because it said she whispered, I have diarrhea. And they let her go into the bathroom by herself. Officer Holly Garza takes her to the bathroom and stands outside the door and asks several times outside, are you okay?
Right.
To which Pam replied, quote, I'm almost done, end quote. But when Holly Garza opens the door, what she finds is that Pam is bloody. She's tried to cut her throat with this ballpoint pen.
Oh, wow.
She's tried to cut her throat and her wrist with a ballpoint pen, saying she was trying to kill herself. Pam underwent surgery at St. Louis University Hospital. They just wanted to make sure she hadn't inflicted significant damage to her neck or wrist.
Right.
And they placed an officer outside her hospital door for 2 days. I thought that was funny. They're not letting her go.
Yep. You ain't dying this way.
Yeah. When Pam goes to jail, she's held on a $2 million cash-only bond.
I think that's about $2 million short.
Yeah. Now, it's a small town, and Pam's arrest and self-inflicted injuries are all over the news, but it's the mugshot from the booking at the St. Charles County Jail on August 25th that becomes this instant classic. Her blonde hair is wild from her 2 days in the hospital. She stares into the camera. She's got this odd look on her face. And I read where someone said it was between a smirk and a frown. But then she has these 2 thickly padded bandages on either side of her neck. And some of the more cynical observers, they refer to this mugshot as Pam Hupp's maxi pad shot.
Oh, man.
Because she's got these 2 big things on the side of her neck.
Oh,
yeah.
man. Just when it couldn't get any worse.
Yeah. I mean, this is a woman who's so vain, I don't want to be on camera, and that's her mugshot.
That's what she's going to be remembered as.
Yeah, the maxi pad shot. And when they search Pam's house, they try to find these plastic bags because after she shot Lewis, she and her husband left the house that night to stay with relatives, and they packed up some stuff in these trash bags, basically. They were going to go stay overnight with relatives. And inside, with some clothes, was a copy of Betsy's death certificate, a federal tax miscellaneous form with Betsy listed as the recipient, transcripts of Pam's testimony and Russ's first trial, interviews with the police, bank statements for the house, 5 manila folders with various records for Pam's mom and brother-in-law, a yellow sticky note with bank account numbers, and one with Pam's mother's name and without explanation or details, what the detective described as a, quote, a note from an individual who had an affair with Mark, end quote. That's her husband.
Oops.
Now, the prosecuting attorney, Tim Lamar, delivered the message to Pam a few months after her arrest and told her, I'm seeking the death penalty.
Yes.
I'm going after you.
Nice.
Now, meanwhile, don't forget prosecuting attorney Leah Askey and Circuit Judge Christina Kunza Minnemeyer in Lincoln County. They had to go up for re-election, and they both lost.
You think?
And the man who ran against Leah ran solely on the premise that she had messed up the Betsy Faria trial so terribly. And Mike is actually the young assistant prosecutor who was so appalled at Leah Askey's closing argument in the first trial in 2013. Remember, he resigned.
Yeah.
He's the one who declared his candidacy for prosecuting attorney.
Nice.
Yes, and beat her.
Good.
Beat her ass hard.
That's good.
By this time, Leah has dropped her ex-husband's last name, was now going by Leah Walmack Cheney, using her maiden name and her current husband's last name. And then she also changed her political party. June 2019, Pam's been in the St. Charles County Jail for almost 3 years by the time her trial is scheduled in the very early spring of 2019, and the DA proposed a plea bargain. If Pam would plead guilty to first-degree murder, he would drop his demand for the death penalty in favor of a life sentence without parole.
Okay.
Now, it took a lot of convincing for Pam, but she finally takes this deal, and she agrees if she can enter what is called an Alford plea, A-L-F-O-R-D.
Okay.
Which is where she doesn't have to admit that she committed the murder, but agrees that the prosecution has enough evidence to convict her in a trial. And it keeps her out of the electric chair. On June 19th, 2019, the crowd was so large in the courtroom to see Pam Hupp plead guilty that they had to move from one courtroom to another. There were 2 rows of the O'Fallon Police Department and other law enforcement officials. Russ Faria was there, along with members of his family, and Joel Schwartz and Nate Swanson. Louis Gumpenberger's mother, Margaret Birch, was there. His sister was there. The media was there. Dateline NBC was there. Pam Hupp's family?
Nowhere to be found.
Not in attendance. When they bring Pam in, she's no longer a bleach blonde. She's completely gray-headed, and she's lost weight. She's no longer she was always kind of a bigger girl.
Yep.
They call her to the witness stand, and she pleads guilty. After she pleads guilty, Russ tells the reporters that he's relieved that Pam pled guilty to Lewis's murder, and it was disappointing she had never confessed to killing his wife, Betsy.
Right.
But the new prosecuting attorney, Mike Wood, announced that he would be opening an investigation into the murder of Betsy Faria.
There you go.
On August 12th, 2019, Pam's official sentencing. In the crowd is Russ Faria and his new girlfriend. It's none other than Carol McAfee.
What?
She's the substitute teacher who had Pam on camera and was instrumental in her arrest for the murder of Louis Gumpenberger.
Wow.
And Carol sits, this is where I said you're going to like her. Carol sits behind Pam's table. And as Pam is kind of talking with her attorneys and smiling, kind of laughing it up, Carol leans forward into Pam's ear and says, quote, "I want you to know I'm the one who put you here, bitch," end quote.
And then she drops the microphone and walks out.
Louis Gumpenberger's sister made an impact statement saying that Pam had murdered 3 people, a friend, her mother, and my brother, and that she would try to forget about Pam, quote, "as she sits lonely and alone in her jail cell," end quote.
Nice.
Pam made no statement that day, but the judge said that, quote, "Louis was an innocent person whose life did not deserve to be extinguished by you," end quote. Pam was sentenced to life in prison without parole and a concurrent 30-year sentence for armed criminal action. That's just kind of formality, but they did add it on there.
Okay.
In September of 2020, Pam tried to withdraw her guilty plea. She filed a handwritten petition asking for the plea to be dismissed, claiming that her defense attorneys pressured her into accepting the plea agreement as they kept her in the dark about the case. Also, while sitting in prison, her husband, Mark, who seemed to stay by her side faithfully through all the chaos between 2011 and 2019.
I wanted to ask about this guy.
He filed for divorce.
Well, there you go.
In St. Charles County on October 12th, 2020. And apparently Pam was furious about this, even though the divorce was uncontested. She said that she and Mark had agreed before she went to jail that there would be no divorce. Because Pam says it.
Yeah.
There'll be no divorce. But not only did he divorce her, there was a quick remarriage for Mark just weeks after the divorce was final.
Was it the person from the letter?
On the Post-it note?
Yeah.
I do not know. I don't know.
I'm going to say it was.
In July of 2020, a judge in St. Charles Circuit Court ordered Pam to pay $3 million in damages to Margaret Birch in a wrongful death suit over the murder of Louis Gumpenberger. The award would be collectible on any income Pam would ever receive. So if she writes a book or if she gets money for this thing on NBC, the thing about Pam, yeah, it has to go to somebody else.
Okay.
As for Russ, he did collect on his federal suit over the investigation and prosecution that put him in prison for almost 4 years, as he should have.
Yep.
The judge dismissed Leah Askey and the Lincoln County Police Department as parties to the suit in 2019 because they had sovereign immunity for acts committed as part of their official duties.
Jeez.
But insurance companies representing detectives Ryan McCarrick, Mike Merkel, and Patrick Harney agreed in March of 2020 to pay Russ the policy limits of the officer's coverage, which is a little over $2 million.
There you go.
So I guess officers have like malpractice insurance kind of thing. Just, I don't know what it's called, but that to me, that's like malpractice.
Right.
On July 12th of 2021, 9.5 years after Betsy Faria is murdered, a new document is filed in Lincoln County Circuit Court by the Sheriff's Office. Prosecuting attorney Mike Wood charged Pam Hupp with first-degree murder and armed criminal action and announced this at a news conference that day that he would seek the death penalty against her for the murder of Betsy Faria.
Good.
He also announced that he and the current sheriff, Rick Harold, were opening an investigation into possible criminal misconduct by the police and prosecutors who conducted the first investigation that led to murder charges against Russ Faria.
Good.
Just days before Wood announced the charges against Pam Hupp, she denied everything. She denied killing Betsy and even the murder of Louis Gumpenberger. And when investigators interviewed her in prison for more than 4 hours, she said that she was convinced that she would say in trial and the new charges, over the new charges, even risking the death penalty, she would say she was innocent, even risking the death penalty, rather than entering a plea of guilty as she did in the Louis Gumpenberger murder. As for Russ Faria and his stepdaughters, I think they've tried to get along. They've tried to reconcile, but it's an ongoing thing. And God bless him. And God bless those kids, too. I know they're young adults now, but best of luck to them. But according to Russ, he says the best revenge against anyone who wronged him was to live well.
Right.
And Russ knows that his attorney, Joel Schwartz and Nate Swanson, who believed in him and took care of him, are part of the reason that he's out. He has profusely thanked those guys and his cousin, Mary Anderson, and all of the family who actively supported him. Chris Hayes at Fox 2, who brought the truth to the people, as well as Robert Patrick at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and Dateline, especially Keith Morrison and producer Kathy Singer. All of these people worked together to bring this story back around so that someone would take notice.
Yeah. I mean, this guy almost spent the rest of his life in jail for something he wasn't even responsible for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At the same time, finally, Pam Hupp has been charged with the murder of Betsy Faria, but so far, there is no trial. Because of COVID-19, everything's been pushed back.
Sure.
But I will keep you updated. This is an ongoing thing. We still want to see Pam Hupp charged with the murder of Betsy Faria.
Yep.
And that's all I have to say about that. Hey, Hitched to Homicide listeners. This is Chris Calvert. I love doing research and writing about real crimes, but I also love writing about fictional people who commit horrible atrocities. When you're ready to take a break from true crime for fictional crime, go to chriscalvert.com, where you'll find all my books, including some free ones to get you started. Jane Doe is one badass chick who quietly hunts terrorists in the United States. The Sex and Lies books are all FBI and CIA cases with a little romance on the side. And coming summer 2022, Book 10 in the series, Sex, Lies, and Rock and Roll, releases. You can find all of these books everywhere, and if you like to listen instead of read, you can find them all on Audible. So go grab a free book or take a listen. I love all the characters I've written. I've given them pain, ruined their lives, make them suffer, and maybe even throw in a heroic death. Or maybe they live to fight another day. Check it all out at chriscalvert.com, and thanks for being a listener of Hitched to Homicide.
Well, okay, there's...
I told you. 10 pounds in a 5-pound sack.
That was crazy. And the scary part is that this guy almost spent the rest of his life in jail.
Yes, he did.
For something he didn't even do.
Just because.
And he lost his wife. Just
he
amazing.
Did. Amazing. I know. Amazing. God love him.
All right. Well, let's lighten this up a bit.
We're going to move from God love him to bless your heart.
Bless your heart. So here's this week's episode of Bless Your Heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right. Dateline, Fort Myers, Florida.
Oh, Florida.
We're back in Florida again.
I love Florida.
This one's titled, Naked Florida Man Jumps Off Roof Onto Homeowner, Knocks Television Over, Empties Vacuum Cleaner, and Masturbates.
It's like a laundry list.
Oh, my.
All right, I need to hear this. Okay, I'm ready. I'm ready.
Here we go. An unnamed North Fort Myers resident is lying in bed relaxing after a hard day's work. Now, just after 7 p.m., he hears a noise coming from his roof. He thinks it sounds like thunder. He goes outside to investigate the disturbance when he sees 21-year-old Gregory Matthew Bruni, whatever his name is, running on his house.
Running?
Yes. The reason he says running on his house is because Bruni leaps from the roof, tackling the man. Bruni is naked.
There's a naked man on your roof.
From there, Bruni runs into the house, hell-bent on destruction. He sees a large television, minding his own business, and knocks it off the stand. He then spies a vacuum cleaner. How do you terrorize a vacuum cleaner, you say? You don't. You just empty the contents back onto the floor. That's what Bruni does. From there, things finally start to get weird.
Oh, my God.
Bruni then headed toward the couple's son's bedroom where several guns were stored, which is a little scary.
Oh.
So the man's wife fired 3 warning shots from a .38 revolver.
Into his head. No, keep going.
No.
Sorry.
Then,
So bless your heart.
This
Sorry.
is a bless your heart. So the arrest report says Bruni fell to the floor. I can't even read this, but I have to. He fell to the floor, but then began pleasuring himself. Why?
Well, he was naked.
He got up off the floor, ran into the son's bedroom, and began rubbing clothing on his face.
Oh.
Police are called, and they apprehend a flailing, babbling Bruni only after tasering him.
Oh, he got tased.
Tase him, bro, a cop
Tase him,
almost certainly
bro.
says. Yeah. Bruni is taken to a hospital, but doctors there say they can't identify what drug he is on. I'm
Or
hoping it was a
how
drug.
many different drugs
Yeah.
he's on.
The answer is either all of them or one that you've never heard of, or bath salts, or probably both, or all. Who knows?
All.
Police charge Bruni with 2 counts of criminal mischief, battery, occupied burglary, and resisting arrest without violence. All I can say is, bless his heart.
Bless his heart. Aw. Well, if you have a bless your heart, you can send it over to us. I get those at chris@hitchedtohomicide.com. You can also go to hitchedtohomicide.com. There's a place for you to suggest a case and a place for you to join the in-laws and outlaws.
Yep.
And we'd love to have you in there.
Come on over.
Come on over. We're glad you joined us again today. That's my loving husband and my better half over there.
And that's my beautiful bride on that side.
Join us next time on Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.